Hi there! In this video we are going to continue our code practice, and now we are going to explore how we can build live monitoring dashboard for machine learning model deployed as online service. The idea is that now we are going to explore how we can send data directly from the machine learning service to monitoring service, so that make monitoring service manage snapshot calculation and storing. Let us try to do that. For doing that, we are going to create a separate script. Let me call it online monitoring dashboard. Here it is, and let's move to our text editor so that we can create a script. I will open up it next to our batch monitoring dashboard so that you can see that they are pretty similar, and maybe definitely I'm going to derive some piece of code here, and you will see how we can spin up our monitoring dashboard here. So I will start from the importing of standard libraries, and a couple of global variables. So if you compare this script with the previous one, which we explored in the previous video, you can see that together with other parts from evidently, we exported evidently collector client, collector config, interval trigger, and report config. We are going to need all these configs to configure our collector, which doing the following. It receives the request from our machine learning service, it collects the data in the memory, and then it manages snapshot calculations, both for reports and test suites. And then it saves our snapshots to the working directory. So basically it manages the work related to the calculation of metrics and tests and saving it in the right place, right? So let us see how we can create this collection config and spin up collector service. First of all, let us create some global variables. It's collector ID and collector test ID, because basically we can have different schedules for our reports and test suites. For instance, we might want to calculate our test suites like every minute and reports on daily basis, right? For doing that, we need to have different configurations for reports and test suites. And I believe today I'm going to only implement the test suites, and maybe later you would be interested to add the reports here. So that's it. And yeah, my project name would be Bank Marketing Online Service, and working path, let me place it to the other folder, Bank Data Online, for instance. So I would like to separate it and have different workspaces for my batch monitoring and online monitoring. And here again, I'm mentioned in the previous video, let me show you the script. And there we use Workspace Bank Data, and actually you could use the same workspace but have different projects. And this is exactly what I would do, but for debugging purpose it would be a little bit more convenient to me first create this workspace separately, do some debugging, make sure that my script works well, and only after that switch back to the same workspace, because I want to show you two projects all together. So that's it. And now let me read my data. And here I cannot help but copy data from here because it's fairly similar. And what I'm going to change here, instead of batch size, I'm going to create mini batch, because the idea is that we send the data via post to our monitoring service, and I can allow myself to have smaller batch and send them more often. So my idea is that I will send mini batch every second. Well, sometimes it makes sense for monitoring, but the batch size would be maybe 50 rows is okay. Yeah, let me keep 50 rows, but actually I would also reduce the size of my reference data with respect to my mini batches. Maybe I want to reduce it 10 times, right? So let it be just, yeah, I think 500 rows is enough. So my reference data will be 10 times bigger than my mini batch. Now let me implement the helper function for test suite calculation. It should be fairly simple. I'm going to create data drift preset test suite. And then I need to run the calculations. Now let's quickly discuss what we just implemented there. Our idea is that we want to let our collector service know what exactly we need to calculate. So what should be test suite, what test should be there, etc, etc. And there are two ways how we can do that. First is to create the config file, which is JSON, and if we do it manually, we need to follow the right structure, which is not very convenient. The other option is to use our function report config from the suite or from report and create the object test suite and then just automatically create this config from this object, right? That's exactly what we did here. So we just created one suite, data drift test preset, and then we said calculate for us config using this test suite. So that's very convenient, and you will see later that we will have automatically generated config for our collector service. So that's it. Now let's proceed to Workspace setup. I will also do it with help of the helper function. And now I would probably, I will unite all the logic related to the workspace and project in the same function just to speed things up a little bit, because we did fairly similar things before. Here you can see that I started from the creation of my workspace, which should be bank data online. Then I created a project which I called bank marketing online service. Then I'm going to configure the project's dashboard, and I'm going to create only two panels related to my tests: aggregated test panel and detailed test panel. Let me do that. That's it. Our first panel will be called Data Drift Tests, right? It will be half-sized, and we will include there all suites, so no filtration by metadata or by text values, and we will include test suites as well. So that's it, and let's create a very similar panel but with detailed information about tests. We already know how to do that from our previous video. We just configured our workspace, the project inside of the workspace, and the dashboard inside of the project. Sorry guys, so many concepts here, but that's how it works. Now it's time to create our collector, right? And what we're going to do here is we are going to set up our collector, create a client, and then implement the function to send data to our collector. So everything in one script. Of course, in a production system it would be like different scripts, but for our example it's quite convenient to keep everything in a single script. So I would better go a little bit upper and create my collector client right here. I think it just looks better like this. I just parameterized my collector client by the local host and the port so that it could spin up in the local host with this port. And I'm going to add some configurations for my collector service. That's it. So what we just created, we implemented setup configuration function, which create the workspace if it's not exists yet. Then it's search for our project, and we search for the project and take the first result, because actually here we search for the actual project name by the actual project name, and definitely we will find one, right? Then we create test configuration, test for test suites, so it configuration for collector config, which going to calculate for us some test suites. And how we configure it. We say that our trigger is interval trigger, so we trigger test suite configuration by time, and we do it every 5 seconds. And our test suite configuration is here. It's test suite which we just created, so we create data drift test preset. We use our helper function here, which returns the configuration calculated directly from test suite, right? And finally, here is the project ID. After, we need to create our collector, and we do it with help of create collector function from client, and we parameterize it by collector test ID and test collector configuration. And finally, we say that here is our reference data, because as for now, we need to pass our reference data directly to our collection service. Here it is. Basically, that's it, and all we need to do is to implement the way how we will simulate the sending data to our collection service. And for doing that, I'm going to just use request library and use post method to just send the data to collector, and then we're going to run the script and see how it works. I would really implement something very straightforward here, and my plan is to send the data from the production simulation data frame by mini batches every second. That's it. I believe 50 cents will be enough, because it's our experiment, but remember that in reality you would have a separate machine learning service from which you are going to send data via post to collector service. But now, as we have no machine learning production service, we just implement it here inside of the Python script. Here you go. So we just implemented send data function. We added a couple of prints to see in terminal what's going on here. And the logic behind this sending data is that we do it in iterations. We will have 50 iterations. You can play around with more or less. And each iteration we try to send data to our client. Our client is collector service here. And then we sleep for 1 second before we do the next iteration and send new batch of data. And that makes sense from the configuration point of view because we parameterized our collector service with the interval equal to 5 seconds. So it's going to calculate new snapshot every 5 seconds, and we will have 5 for iteration between that to collect at least like 250 or 200 data rows there. So looks like quite a good idea. Okay, so now let's implement main function and run the script. I believe that's it. So finally in our main we check whether our workspace already exists, and if it exists, like it's not if it exists, well, basically we check the OR statement between whether we have our workspace and whether we have our project in our workspace. And if any of this is like non-correct, we create our workspace, right? And we run this workspace setup, which first creates for us workspace and then create a project. That's it. After we run setup config function, which parameterized our collector client, right? And finally we start to send data and iterate over 50 iterations. Again, let's do some debugging and see whether it works or not. So I'm going to go back to my terminal and run the script with help of Python online monitoring dashboard. So I want to see whether it works or not. Yeah, sure. That's a function, so let's fix that quickly. So now I'm happy with the results, and what I'm gonna do next is open up one more tab and run evidently collector service. For doing that, I activate my environment. Then I run evidently UI, not evidently UI, evidently collector this time. And let me remind myself with the options. Host, the default one, okay. Then port, exactly as we selected. Yeah, I'm happy with this default configuration, so I'm just going to run this collector service. Yep, it works, and I would dare to change my workspace here from the bank data online to data. I hope this should be fine, and I'm going to run the script once again and see whether we can, yeah, we can see that there are more and more test suites, and if we update our dashboard, we will be able to see that we have more and more like data here. So I can see that I just updated, and probably, yeah, that's it. So data continue to be sent. Yeah, more data available now. And that's how we can build online dashboard, right? Actually, that's just an example, and after 50 iteration it stops. But if you have production service, you can continue sending data here, and you will be able to see the online updated dashboard. So let me update it once again. Even more data here. And you can see that there are quite a lot of test suites, so you can open up and observe each of them in the details, right? And finally, going back here. Yeah, you can see that there are quite a lot of data. It's just finished. We can see that the last send has been done. Well, that's it. I believe now you see how you can use collector service to manage snapshot calculations for you, and if your machine learning model deployed as a service, you can send data directly to the collector service so that it calculates snapshots for you, and then you can use Evidently UI to build the dashboard, right? I know that quite often you already have some monitoring system implemented and supported in your company. For instance, it can be Grafana, because Grafana nowadays is a very popular tool for dashboarding, right? In our next video, I'm going to show you how you can use Evidently as an evaluation layer to build up then dashboards in Grafana.